Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming out on Friday. Please silence your cell phones if you can. And we'll get started here in a minute. We made it almost through the week, and it's been a good GDC. So first of all, I'm Scott Lawlor, and this is Tomas Neumann. And we are from Blizzard Entertainment. Of course, most people have heard of Blizzard before, but I want to explain a little bit about the company and the company's culture. So this image here is of a bronze-casted orc that sits in the middle of our courtyard. And it's kind of ridiculous. It's about 14 feet tall and a very permanent structure and something that we walk by all the time. And that might just seem like this sort of cool, interesting thing that we did, but it has a lot of significance and value to the company. Because around the base of that, in the circle, is all of the core values of the company. And they're all labeled and cast in bronze for us to remember every day as we walk by. And there's a lot of sayings in there. Some are like, embrace your inner geek, or every voice matters, and all these different sayings that actually are brought up in our meetings on a daily basis. It's very, very common that people, structure their thought sometimes around these values of the company. And one of the first ones, and probably the most important one on there, is gameplay first. It's a huge, huge part of being at Blizzard. It's something that constantly is talked about. And it's something that we took very seriously in sound. So early on in the production, we were talking with our game director, Jeff Kaplan. And he gave us this goal, this lofty goal of, I want to be able to play the game practically with the monitor turned off. We would, of course, never be able to do that. But his point was that he wanted so much information about what was going on to be encoded in the sound that you were able to get a lot more information other than this little screen that you're able to see. You could, gather information about what's going on around you. So, yeah, before we get into the details of how we did that with Overwatch, we want to give you a little introduction to the world.
Yeah, hi, and welcome from me as well. Blizzard is known for World of Warcraft, right, obviously. And this is a very special game for us, Overwatch. It's actually a very new IP. It's a shooter game from Blizzard. I think a lot of people have not expected that. And it happens to be that we really like shooter games as well. And we do and make these games that we like. And so I want to introduce you guys to a little bit what Overwatch is, because we haven't even shipped yet. Like, we are in beta. And Overwatch is a competitive, team-based, first-person shooter. We have, right now, 21 heroes, which are very special and fun characters with a lot of soul and emotions. And they have these over-the-top abilities that they fight each other. And we're actually a pretty crowded game. We have a 6 versus 6. And most of the time, we have something to do in the map. Maybe escort a payload. And as I said, we are in beta right now, and we are launching in May 24th. So this is super special to share this with you before even we ship the game. We're excited to tell you about our game and what we did with the sound. And I want a quick raise of hands here. Who of you have really not so much to do with audio itself and more on the design side? Can I see that? Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, Thank you for coming. And then I think, as some of you might have seen some Overwatch stuff on Twitch, so we want to allow, if you guys allow, we show a little video for you to get the idea of what is the art style, what is the vibe of the game, and then you have a better of a reference of what we will talk about. So that's the video.
Let's drop the beat!
We are determination.
We are justice.
We are courage.
We are Overwatch.
Done! Woohoo!
Did someone call a doctor?
Justice reigns from above.
Pass into the iris. Kaboom!
The world could always use more heroes.
Okay.
All right, so thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure to work on the game, and actually I think I skipped a slide here. So I just want to talk a bit about just what this means for the game. So we kind of got into it a little bit earlier when I was mentioning it, but we want to get as much information as we can to the player so they can be a better player in the game. So quick reaction time, being able to quickly respond to a threat. It makes the game more enjoyable for, I think, the players because they feel like they've had a fair shot at the moment and they can respond accordingly and fairly. So to kind of break down this topic, this is going to be the central slide that we'll keep coming back to throughout today. And these are the 6 pillars that we really have formed this talk around. So number 1, a clear mix. We want to make sure that you can always hear what's important. Number 2, pinpoint accuracy. We want to make sure you can locate your threats quickly and easily. Gameplay information. We want the sounds and the VO and all these things to encode a lot of information themselves with the sounds. We want very informative hero VO. And we want this all to sort of work towards this Pavlovian response where you have a sound and you have a reaction. So to kind of break into that a little bit, we're going to start by discussing the clear mix. As you can imagine, Overwatch has a lot of things going on at once. One of the early inspirations, and this was actually from an audio director I worked with many, many years ago, he introduced me to this article by Walter Murch. It's a very famous sound design article called Dense Clarity, Clear Density. And he gives examples where he goes into films he's done like Apocalypse Now and how he'll remove elements that you would expect to be in the mix. And you're subconsciously, since you're concentrating on something else, you don't even realize that they're gone. And it's kind of on this spectrum of encoded to embodied. And what that means on the left side, encoded is much more information-heavy sounds, like, voice is probably the most in that regard. Or even then a little bit of things like a telephone ring has more information sort of built into the sound itself. And on the other side, you have music, which is a very emotional type of sound. And also you could then have something like a whale song, which is much more musical. And they're sort of across the spectrum. And you can only handle so much from each sort of category all at one time. So there's a number of things that people use to try to manage a mix and reduce information for you. A very popular technique is HDR. And it's something we tried.
Which stands for?
Oh, high dynamic range audio. So that's something we tried to use in production. It's a really great system. I'll give a brief explanation of it. So on the left, you have a picture of a background ambience, like a room tone, just kind of a low rumble. Next to it, you have a picture of a loud sound. And then what HDR does, it kind of ducks out the background noise. So you can kind of see, if you look at it, sort of carved out a space for that loud sound. So when they're mixed together, they don't really conflict with each other very much. And it's a really great system, and it does a really good job of dealing with dynamic range and how much you can process at once. But it all runs on one fundamental rule, which is the loudest sound wins. And we were working with it, and everything was sounding good, but we were missing key gameplay information. Someone behind would walk up, and their footsteps would get drowned out, and you get a shotgun to the back of the head, and you're like, I never had a chance to respond to that. So we started thinking about how we could approach this problem a little bit differently. Martin from Audiokinetic, it was actually kind of one of the impetus of this idea. We were talking about how we were using HDR, and he was the one who mentioned that volume is what it's working on. Maybe you can give it more interesting information. So we started thinking about really this fundamental question of who is my greatest threat. There's a lot of things that we could figure out in runtime with the game. Who am I looking at? Who's looking at me? Who's close by? Who's shooting their weapon in my airspace? Who's using a dangerous ability, who's damaging me, all these different things. And we could do that, and if you even just look at this picture for a second, you would think just by looking at this that the Reinhardt, the big guy in the armor in the center of the screen, might be the most important. But that might not be the case if up there on top, the Pharah who's shooting a rocket at you, is that they're directly targeting you. They're looking at you. Maybe she's using this devastating ability. Maybe she should be the one in the mix, not the one that's right in front of you. So there's all these different elements that we kind of take into play.
Yeah, so then we talked about that as a whole team, and we came up with a system, and we wanted to solve that problem, which brings us to the important system. It's a little bit tiny there, but in the end, it's values like what is the size of me on someone else's computer, essentially, that drives importance. And we wanted to solve that systematically. And to explain that system really briefly and very simply, just imagine you're the player there in the middle, and you have an enemy nearby, but just not looking at you, not interacting with you. And we give them some threat points. And let's say we introduce the second one, who's even further away. The one closest still wins. Like, it's still what we treat as the most critical one. But the other one is there. He should be heard. And let's say we introduce a third enemy, and that one is actually aiming at you, maybe even doing damage, and we add more threat points to that person, and then that person wins. So the red color indicates the most important person. And just, we have 6 versus 6, so that means we have 5 people who are friendly, 6 people who are enemies, and so this can just go on. And we collect these numbers, and we take them and apply them to our heroes, including what we call pets, for instance, the turrets from Tourbillon, and we list them all up. And then we thought, well, that is great. That gives us really good dynamic range and these number values. And we thought about giving those values to Y so Scott can work with that. And we figured out that if we have 5 really critical, important people all aiming and damaging you, again, we got drowned in the mix. So what we do instead is we came up with this idea of buckets, where we said, there's always one person we treat as the most important one. We put 2 in a medium bucket, and then we have like other buckets that Scott will talk about. And instead of actually giving the threat number to Wise, we will provide, and Wise actually, we could have mentioned that, is our middle software that we're using for the game designers of you. And then we give the bucket index to Wise, and then Scott can talk about how he reacts on those values.
So the way the buckets are broken down is that, like I said, there's 1 person in the high bucket. We normally have about 2 in the, and then we actually kind of change these numbers all the time based on, adjustments. But we have 2 in the normal bucket. In the low bucket, we have most of the enemies, as well as your friendly characters fall into that bucket. And then anything that kind of spills out past that goes into what we call the coal bucket, which isn't truly a coal, but it's like very, very low priority sounds, in our opinion, or at least that person is a very low priority. So if you'll notice, that going back to that Walter Murch slide, there's very little information on the left. We're trying to get as much as we can reduced and removed from the mix. There's only really 3 that are very, very high importance. And we treat these values very distinctly. So pay attention to how the high is on the left and the coal is on the right. And then I'm going to show you a screenshot of Wise here. So what this is it lives on a category of sounds, and it's called an RTPC, which is a real-time parameter control. And then we can control a parameter, in this case, makeup gain, according to where it is on the scale. So you see the red arrow is pointing to where the high importance bucket is. So that sounds about, I don't know, maybe 7 dB louder for their weapon fire, specifically. The next one down is the other ones where it drops down to maybe plus 2 dB. Then the friendlies are at 0 dB. And then finally the call, which there's not many of those, will drop off significantly. And we don't only do this for makeup gain. We do this for various parameters. So the next slide just shows all the other stuff we're doing. We're even modulating pitch. We're modulating low pass and high pass filters, so that things get a little bit more dim or less bass build up over time. And we do all of this on specific categories because not all sounds are really created equal for us. This is how we choose to treat our weapon fire. But then something like, say, ultimate abilities has a much less steep curve. It's basically because these things are important regardless of when it happens in the match or where they are. These things still need to cut through the mix. So they have a much higher and more steady sort of curve to it. And then we drive a lot of parameters with it. So I have a video here that I want to show you that gives a good example of it. There's some enemies lined up, and we'll give you a good shot, and I'll explain some of it more. Actually, before I go any further, I want to point out one thing. The red outline is the high importance. The yellow is the next bucket down. And you'll see it swap back and forth, and listen to for their footsteps and how those things are really standing out when they're in the red high importance bucket. So then we'd use this for other things as well. So that kind of just shows how it's sort of trading off and how it's sort of bouncing between the two. But then it really helps us with the friendly and enemy switching. So what you're about to see is a Reaper, one of our characters that runs around with shotguns. He will run by as I think, enemy first, and then friendly next. And these are the exact same sounds, but they're filtered and changed in different ways so that they don't really interfere with your expectations, and you don't need to turn around to address your enemy, or your friendly enemy.
I mean, that was just the important system, just dealing that.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it really helped us clarify the mix. It's something that we're constantly iterating on and moving forward with. But, yeah, we want to move on to the next category, which is pinpoint accuracy.
Yeah, I can talk to that. So what we want to understand is, now that with the importance system helping us with the mix, and we understand what is the most important part that we want to, or enemy we want to focus on, we want to help the player to learn how to locate that thread easily. And we have a bunch of tools that we do. We want to talk about these three, obstruction, occlusion, distance and space, and then 3D audio. And I start talking really briefly about obstruction and occlusion. I think the sound guys of you know these terms, the game designers maybe not, but in general, obstruction is more the concept of you have a sound and a listener in the same room, and the direct sound is occluded by an object, while the reflections can still reach that listener. And occlusion, on the other hand, is more the concept where they're pretty much in different rooms even. There's no direct sound propagation reaching that sound, that listener, sorry. It goes through another medium. That's at least the technical interpretation. And, you know, it seems like everyone implements that somewhat in a standard way. You can go and improve them. Usually obstruction is done with a raycast, and then your dynamic range of the signal that you get essentially varies from 0 to 1, and you can, in some implementations, you can find that angle between the occluder and maybe that drives the value a little bit smoother, while occlusion is pretty much an on-off thing. You're either in a different room or not, and there's not so much values that you can work with. And it turns out that was really a problem for us. We implemented that. We thought that's how we did it in every game before, and somehow it didn't help us. Our values were really black and white, and we couldn't really convey to the player when they're in danger. So, and that was especially hard in our situation where you had an enemy just above you in a different room, maybe only 3 meters away. We do a raycast, it blocks, we do some obstruction, and we would still hear footsteps, especially Reaper footsteps were loud, and people were turning around and says, where is he, where is he? And that was, and we tried solving that with sound spaces, like area-based things and portals, and nothing really worked. And then at sometime, Tim Ford, who's the lead game programmer, and his team was working on the flight path data for our AI, because we have flying enemies and we have this huge voxel database. And all of us somehow had that idea of suddenly saying, well, what if we just had a path and we would know how long that path is? So essentially we did that. We do a raycast to understand that you can see that sound or not, and we shoot them from the listener. And let's say you have a 20-meter distance and you have a detour essentially of a meter, we drive our path diversion to 5%. That means your path is just a little bit longer than your direct ray. And in this example, and this is like a top-down view, let's say that occluder is bigger, and the path that you have to take to reach that position in the world is longer. And let's say it's a detour of 6 meters, you would get a path diversion of 30%. And just to make that example, like if it's really long, and after 20 meters, we reach full occlusion essentially. And we just, that's our range. And suddenly we have a really good range of values for occlusion, and we really don't care that much about obstruction anymore, which is super funny. And yeah, did I wanted to say something about this? I think I'm done. Scott, you're next.
All right, so we tried to use the internal WISE occlusion and obstruction parameter, and it's great for base implementations. Highly suggest using it, but it does have some limitations because if you even notice, the top there says project settings. So there's only one place in WISE where you can tune this value. It's a fall off of volume. It's a fall off of low pass. And those who don't know what low pass is, it's the thing that makes you get a woefully and less so. High pass does the same thing for bass frequencies. And it only lets you draw this curve once. And you can sort of subscribe into it as certain percentages to go further down the curve. But that was very hard for us to tune. So one of the things we did is actually very similar to how we set up the sound importance values. Is also an RTPC on a category of sounds. So going from 0% occlusion, meaning like they're in the open and you can hear them clearly, that's on the far left, to 100% occlusion, meaning they're in the next conference room. That's the curve that we draw. So in this case, what I'm showing you is a voice low-pass filter. And it's getting more and more intense the more and more occluded they are. And we do this again on categories of sounds. This is for 3P footsteps. So we don't want you to notice it. Like if there's someone right on the other side of this wall walking right there, they're 100% occluded. They're going to get massively reduced in volume and in frequencies. So we do that, and then we modulate a bunch of parameters. So this is our what we actually do for 3P footsteps. We are also modulating the send amounts that we send to reverb, that we're sending to our delay system, that we're sending to the different filters. And so we do all of this so that it makes it clear that those footsteps are out of your danger area, I suppose is the way to put it. Then we want to treat each sound differently again. So this is the 3P weapon fire. It's very different curves, as you can see. We don't need to worry too much about all the details. It's just that we don't want to be as extreme with this. And they'll have a video example that'll show this in just a second. So there's a couple things once we implemented this that were really, really stark about how much value we really got. This is maybe the most important feature that we added to the game when it comes to playing by sound, because you could then almost listen to the walls, and you could hear as you were turning the corner that things were getting dimmer and quieter and more low pass, and you had a sense of safety when you were out of the way of danger. And you wouldn't have spent so much time worrying about enemies that weren't able to hurt you, and you had this sense of safety from hiding out. So I'm going to give you a more discrete example here with footsteps and weapons. I'm just going to be standing still, and there'll be this Widowmaker character who will walk behind the wall. You'll notice that the footsteps go away fairly quickly, but you can still hear the gun. And then she'll come back, and I'll do that once or twice in the video. That should help explain this. So you can see that there's a very smooth value change, and you could tell she was getting closer. That's something that the obstruction was never able to get us. It was on and off. They were behind a wall or they weren't. So that gives you a ton of subconscious information. The next example is the same system. but want to show how it works with more or less a full battle. So I'll be standing on a ledge, and I'll hear this battle going on, and then I'll go hide in a little cubby hole, listen to everything, it gets really quiet until you hear the one person walk in the room, and it really helps that person stand out.
And also try to guess when that person is visible. Like, how you anticipate that.
So hopefully that did a good job of explaining sort of what we did that for and sort of what we got out of it. We also tried to rely on a lot of more common features to help describe a sound over space so that you get information about how far away someone is for you. And we do things that are relatively common in the industry, like layering sounds. So you have different sounds that fade in and out over distance the further they are away. We change our tails on our guns based on if you're indoor or outdoor, so you get less of a reverberation on the tail. We do distance filtering, so things get more muffled over distance. We control the focus and spread, how wide a sound is or how narrow it is. And we modulate reverb and quad delay, which is really the one that we want to talk the most about here is the quad delay. So that was a custom... are we going to take this? That was a custom plugin that we decided to make. And we just basically had this idea that we could sort of try and simulate some of the early reflections of the environment based on where you're standing just with the geometry of the game. So this is a little hard to see, but there's a little beam weapon coming out of our character Zarya, and it's a top-down view. And what we decided is we were going to cast a ray in each direction compared to a surround sound system for each of your front, left, and rear and right speakers.
Look at the speakers.
Yeah, they're always placed around. So what we could kind of derive from that is that, you know, in a pseudo-scientific way, there would be a theoretical slapback that would happen when you reach a perfectly angled wall in that direction. And so we kind of do this, and basically speed travels at about a millisecond per meter, I think, roughly, more or less. So we're basically delaying the sound in each of these channels, all according to the environment itself. And it's really interesting. It gives you a lot of subconscious cues about the space you're in, and it's very interesting to check out. So this is the plugin that we ended up creating. And what it is it's 4 distinct delay lines. They're all multi-top delays, so they can kind of have a little flutter on it. They all have parametric EQs, 4-band, and it has 4 panners, so you could pan it to each of these 4 speakers. And then all of that is modulated based on those rays that we showed in the previous screenshot. So if the reflection is close, it might be a very bright and high-pitched, I guess, almost reflection. If it's a distant, it might be more bassy and more of a muffled type of reflection you'll get back from that. So we have an example that shows this, and it might sound a little strange at first because you're literally only hearing the delay line. So you just kind of hear this, how they sound over these different distances, and then I bring back in the full sound so you can see how it layers in. So when those explosions would happen, you would hear the empty space and the distant echoes coming from the proper direction. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff that we did there. And that all led up to just trying to help the player be able to locate where these threats are coming from over distance, if they're in the room with you, and how you can locate them really, really quickly.
Yeah, and get a good sense of how you're rooted in the world. So the next chapter is gameplay information, and this is close to my heart. I want to talk real quick about how we got here. So the mix helped us to understand what is the most important thing you should pay attention to. Then the accuracy helped us to understand how to anticipate that and how to aim essentially for that. And now really what we want to help the player to solve is who is it that you are dealing with? And for that, our engine is whole in our house, and we have a great system where we move gameplay facts and information around multiple systems, animation, the effect system, and so on. And that system is called data flow. That's our internal name. And that we're using heavily to drive values, these so-called RTPCs in our middleware, to make sounds very dynamic. And as I said before, we have 21 heroes, and Overwatch has this really important rule because you can change these heroes at runtime, and then in any combination. So it might be that you have 2 tracers on your team and another one an enemy, and so on. And so we have a lot of things that we need to process and understand. Is that a threat or not? And who is that? Is that a tracer or a mercy? And I think the sound team did a great job in giving each character a lot of their own design. And I think that could be its own design talk. In terms of this chapter, we want to talk about the information that lies in these sounds. And we want to understand what are gameplay cues, what Jeff Kaplan would tell us is that this is important for the player, and try to communicate that to the player. So having said that, let's show a few examples. This one is footsteps. We even had, while we were in the beta, a community member recorded every hero coming around a corner to help other players to train, essentially, their brains into understanding who is that footstep, because every hero has their own unique footsteps. And we thought that was such a fun, cool idea, so we ripped that off, and we want to show you that. Oops, how did I do that? Okay. So this is Mercy, one of our healers. There's McCree, like a cowboy guy. Reaper with lots of leather. That's our friend Tracer. That's Bat Killing Machine. That's peg-legged Junkrat. Very heavy Roadhog, that's the name of this character. And that's Mai.
你好。
So, and you know, I think that's a good example how obviously we have multiple surface types and all that, but just the footsteps and the Foley sounds really help you learn who are you interacting with. Now, this example is a great example for data flow and how we drive our weapon sounds, changes with that. We have subtle changes in small information when you're low on ammo, which in this example we don't hear, but this one is about the ultimate of 76. That's the character's name. And his ability is Tactical Visor, where essentially he auto-aims at players and enemies. And it was really important. It took us quite a few iterations to get that sound right. It sounds really dangerous when he pops his ult. And you want to get into cover because you only have a few seconds to live, essentially. And then it's really important also to understand when that sound ends, because that's when you want to get out of cover and engage him. So try to listen and understand when sounds start and end in this example. You will hear this normal weapon fire first as a reference.
I've got you in my sights.
So that's a dramatic, important sound that we can now communicate to the player. The next example is Lucio. It's one of our healer classes. He has an ultimate called Sound Barrier, and the team nicknamed that ability to Bro Shield. It gives extra armor points to all allies around him. And it's funny to see, and again, you can have a Lucio on your team or on the enemy team, and how important it is in which role and in which context you are hearing that sound. So in this example, we play the enemy line first, and that is just important that you understand. He popped it. Everyone on his team, you don't even need to bother shooting at them because they have so many armor. But if he's on the friendly team, you want to understand how long you have those armor points, and again, when they end. So let's see if that comes across. Also, the footsteps on the enemy team is pretty hard.
Drop the beat!
Right? It's okay. And now he's his ally. The footsteps are a little bit settled.
Oh, let's break it! Damn!
Okay, last example. Mercy, our healer, she has a staff, and she heals and damage boosts people. And we have that beam connection, and for the person who gets healed, it is important to understand, am I connected with Mercy? Because normally she's behind you. We want to convey that easily. And also for Mercy, if she heals someone, she can actually listen with our data flow system. We pipe the values of the target through the staff sound, so she can hear how much the health pool of her target goes up. In this example, we only show the target perspective, and that's Tracer. This one is pretty much straightforward. It's a pitch. We damage to her.
Let's get you back out there.
Right? It's really more a proof of concept where that is important. Again, for gameplay information, you want to understand where you are. So with that, we are reaching the next pillar.
So similar to how there's a lot of gameplay information in those sound examples, we really wanted to get a lot of information into our VO and the way that the heroes speak to each other. So one of the reasons for this is because team communication is super, super key to the game. It's all team-based. The better the team communicates, the better chance they have of winning. And for that, voice over IP is obviously something that we wanted to leverage. And it's one of the things we did early in the process. But the truth is, not everyone loves to talk on a microphone to maybe people they don't know, or some people may not even have the hardware for it. So it's not a perfect solution for everything. So we wanted our heroes to actually help fill in some of that role. And being able to communicate with people without voice chat towards your goal is a big feature that we really wanted to leverage for this game. So we wanted the heroes to automatically be able to say things where they could speak about an objective. When they start taking the objective, they can alert the team. When they're doing various other abilities, they give you a lot of information if you need to hide or if you need to come help or assist them. And then also, there's a communication wheel that allows you to, if you don't want to talk, you could still say, oh, my ultimate is ready to go, or wait here, let's try and group up. Or you could say these certain things to your team to try and communicate without your voice itself. So we just want you to, the other key point actually for the examples we're going to give you now is that every person has a very customized experience of the VO for their experience, for them and them as a player. The example that's going to be coming up here is...
we have one more slide.
Oh, we have a... sorry, you want to take this one?
Sure.
Yeah, go for it.
So the chance we had with Overwatch, because as I said, it's a whole new engine. Like when we started, we had to fake the VO. We put them on the sounds before we even had a voice system. And we were trying to understand what is that voice system and what we need for that. And we got inspired by great other GDC talks. And our voice system is stimulus-driven. That means that at some point we say this happens, this event happened. And then we have our voice lines associated with criterias. For instance, you're on the friendly you're on the friendly team, or you're in this special map, or you're currently pushing the payload, and all these things. And once these criteria are true, we select that line. And the more criteria are true, the better. And that makes our VO inherently suddenly very specific. And if some of these criteria are not true, we take and play baselines. And all that happens on our server. So we have this truth happening across all players, all 12 players. But then, as Scott said, everyone has their own perspective. And we will show that. And again, I think our voice system would be its own topic to talk about. We can just mention these things, and you can ask us later if you have some questions. So do you want to set that up?
Sure. So this is the exact same moment. We recorded 3 different videos on 3 different machines of the 3 different players. I think Tomas, myself, and our coworker was one of them. And what happens is Farrah will jump into the air, and she'll do an ultimate ability, and Reinhardt's going to put his shield up, and Widowmaker's going to snipe. And what to listen for in each of these videos is how the lines play and what lines play and how it's different from one to another. And this is everything from the little exerts they make when they jump up or the way they die to what they say when the abilities happen. So we'll start with Farrah's perspective, and we'll get this going and see.
Justice reigns from above!
In text there, you can see the name of the stimuli that causes the voice to happen.
Right. And don't get intimidated by that. Let's try to focus on these yellow lines. These were the lines we just heard. And just to explain that table, we have the hero names on the left, the stimuli that fired that line. We have a broadcast category, which means who that voice line request is actually sent to which clients. And then the category is really a very simple system of, a critical line would kill an exert. It just helps us to understand which line can be interrupted by which other class. And then the hurt line is just for us. Those are the ones that we want to focus on when we talk about this. So the first yellow line was the jump. It was just a small exert. It was only for the player. No other player would hear that. It's just reactive. If you want to jump, you want to feel embodied. Then she pulled her rocket barrage, which is her ability, and we communicate that to the enemies because it's very important for them to get into cover, also to the player because obviously she pulled her ult, and that is a really important moment for her as well. This is a critical line. It would have interrupted other lines that she would have said in that moment. What's important here is that system in itself gives us a lot of flexibility, and we can iterate really quickly either on the category, on the broadcast. It just takes a few clicks and we change the system. And since we prepared the slides, I think we have a friendly version of her rocket barrage. So if you are a teammate of Farrah, you will hear a slightly different wording, and then over time you learn that is the one I can stay out in the open and help her fire at people instead of going into cover. Like, we prevent false positives here. She dies. That's on the death category. Everyone hears that. It's always important to hear when someone essentially gets kicked out of the battle for a few seconds. And then you saw Reinhardt charging up that alley there. Didn't make a lot of sense now, but a lot of people all hear that, and the charge is actually critical because that is one of Reinhardt's abilities. He can pick up enemies and smash them into a wall. So the next scenario is Widowmaker's view, she is a teammate of Reinhardt, and she will just wait for a moment to see Pharah up there and take her out.
Shield engaged!
Justice rains from above. Next.
All right. So again, yellow lines are the ones we heard. The bold lines are the ones that are new and that I want to talk about. The first one was the Reinhardt shield. He put up his shield, and that was communicated to all the friendly players and himself. So in the chatter category, we felt that is good enough. And then we talked about the rocket barrage and the death. So the next line is the Widowmaker enemy kill crit because she landed a headshot. She kind of compliments herself. And we only communicate that to the player because we didn't want to taunt people. We want to keep the game really friendly and emotional, non-toxic. So it's a little reward. You hear it, but the player that gets shot doesn't hear it, and we do that very deliberately. And then again, did we talk about that? Yeah, the Reinhardt charge happened, of course. So the next view is the Reinhardt scenario, and here you will hear that at some point the shield will go low, and he will comment on his own shield.
Shield engaged!
Justice rains from above.
Shield forever! I'll feel that in the morning.
So what's important here again is that it's the third line from the bottom, the shield low health. It's just for the player to help him maneuver with his abilities. That is a good moment for him to actually get out of cover because once the shield is gone, Reinhardt is pretty vulnerable for far-range enemies. And so people can learn to just step aside, maybe keep the shield and go into cover. And then the last line is the unsuccessful charge. We have two stimuli, one for the success when he picks someone up and slams that in the wall. This one is the unsuccessful version. He just taunts himself. It's only for the player, and we kind of motivate him to try better next time and maybe find someone to pick up. Okay.
Great. So the VO, I think, was great from a gameplay perspective, but it also really gave these characters a lot of personality. And I think that is something that we want to talk about a little bit. Pavlovian response. All of these, I mean, it's kind of in a way our summary slide because we're kind of wrapping up things here. All these things are, here so that you can react quickly. And that's what we mean by that. We want justice reigns from above, and people immediately turn and try and react as quickly as they can, or run to cover, or do whatever they need to, so that, again, if they get killed by that, they're like, well, at least I had a chance, rather than feeling like it was a cheap kill. So it was absolutely key that we did that. And part of that was actually doing some things for the sound designers in the room. We made a very minimal variations for certain sounds and certain VO. And I don't know about most of you that have done this. That's a very kind of alien concept, actually. Normally, we're trying to put as many variants as we can so things sound like natural and cinematic. But we very intentionally drew that back to so it always says justice reigns from above. And that has also helped us in some other ways. It's led to some very iconic voice lines. So these pictures you see here are fan art. So and I think a lot of these were created within a week or two of us announcing the game at BlizzCon last year in 2014, actually. People immediately started posting images with these taglines on there. They become a huge part of the character. And all of it's really just trying to keep your experience with the game positive and keep your reaction time as small as possible. So it's kind of hard to put that into a video example. So what we decided to do here was show you a little before and after. We took all the things we talked about today, and we did a gameplay sequence that you'll see first, where all this stuff is turned off. There's no occlusion, there's no voice lines, there's no importance system, no quad delay. And it still sounds decent, but you'll see then the comparison video after and what it does bring to the situation.
So the color is intentionally grayed out. I mean, it was pretty messy. It was hard to focus. At least we think that. And so this is the after.
Hello. Hi. Contact. Turret detected. Tip-top. Enemy turret down. Clearing the area. Let's try that again.
Was that? Did that work for you guys? Like, I don't. We don't know. So to wrap up, actually, I make that really fast, so we have some time for Q&A. I think we really tried hard to work on these pillars that we set up, delivering a clear mix, understanding what is important, then where it is, and when, essentially, when we can anticipate an enemy, put a lot of information into the sounds themselves, even into the music. The music itself also carries a lot of gameplay information, and we had no time to talk about that. And create dynamic sounds. The VO that helps us to communicate things and call outs that you are attacked from behind, that there's a turret, that the enemy team has a teleporter. All these things are super valuable, and we get some good feedback on that from our beta players right now. And then what Scott just mentioned, the reaction time, that you'll learn that the game is easy to start, but you can master it, and there's so much information there. So we create really competitive play and allow players to become masters of the game. And as you see, there's a little, how do you call that thing?
Asterisk.
There's
an asterisk on the pinpoint accuracy slide. So those of you who may have been paying close attention, there was a little thing that we didn't talk about for 3D audio. So 3D audio is something that people have been talking a lot about at the conference, and we're really happy to announce that we're going to be supporting Dolby Atmos for the game. So that's a huge deal for us. It was a year-long effort of helping co-develop it with Audio Kinetic, with Wise, with Dolby. And while it's just, the concept's great, and it's a very cool thing, but unfortunately not a lot of people have a Dolby Atmos system at home as much as you might want one. And also, for those of you who don't know Dolby Atmos, it's the technology that's in a lot of theaters now where it has full, surround in a big sphere around you so you can hear things up and down
with
and
elevation.
around. But so since most people don't have this at home, the thing that really intrigued us is we're going to be the first game to ever support Dolby Atmos over headphones. And this is coming to our beta next week, which is really, really cool. So we think this is going to be a good thing for the game above all, that when you play the game with it on and you could pinpoint the Pharah flying above your head or the sniper up on the ledge, it adds to this fundamental goal of trying to play the game by sound. So the beta's coming out next week for those who are in it, and then there's going to be an open beta in early May. There's going to be an open beta. So it's PC only for the moment, and but if you can download the game in early May, you can check it out with a regular pair of stereo headphones, and you don't need to buy anything to check it out. So, yeah.
And then you are next as well.
Okay. Just wrapping this up, it was a huge effort. The reason we called this talk the Elusive goal is because we don't know if we really met this play-by sound thing. It's something we're always going to be reaching for. There's going to be major next steps as we continue to develop this game over time. We're not really sure what those are at this point. We're just going to keep iterating on these systems and trying to make them better. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we hope that we inspired you to, either play by sound or help us to get better and better at that. And with that, I want to do a big shout out at the people that are currently in Irvine working on the game and allowed us to come here to talk about this. All of the sound team there you can see contributed to obviously the whole game, but also this talk.
And Andrea Toyas too, which we didn't
right.
in this picture, which is a
and we're our
huge part of it.
voice director. So many people. And we are just two faces representing this group. And then that goes out to the whole team of Overwatch. Like, we always have a saying, it takes Blizzard to ship a game, and also it takes the whole team to make a sound presentation. So thank you for everyone at home. And that's it. That's a wrap. We have some time for Q&A, and then after that, we will traverse to that little section across from, 3022, which is just on the other side, the big corridor on the other side of this floor. So thank you, guys. Oh, yeah, so if you have questions, so please line up on the microphone there. And we have the first one.
Thanks for the amazing talk, guys. My name's Crispin. I really love what you guys are doing with the importance system and the quad delay system. Those are really cool. So my question around those is, how do you mitigate the expense? Like, are you pulling that stuff at a lower frame rate, or because it's casting rays, in my experience, can be kind of costly.
So the importance system is inherently in our game fact system. Like,
okay.
we essentially every sound has an RTPC that is called game importance or sound importance, and we throw that back into our game system, and that data flow system I was briefly mentioning answers that question. And with that, it asks all these different questions of, like, how big am I in someone else? And it goes through all the rules in our voice system, in our importance system, and Scott can weigh these rules. And we're still tweaking them back and forth and say, this rule is mainly be a little bit more important now with this new hero and whatsoever. So all these questions are asked into the system, and we get these numbers back, and then we end up sorting this list. And for quad delay, real quick.
Are you evaluating that every frame, or is it? Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And with the quad delay, this is a super cheap system. We are doing like a single ray cast every frame. Like, we go left, right, rear, rear.
Okay.
And this ray is pretty long, so that's why we only do one a frame, because they can go up to 170 meters. And Aaron Cuddo, our physics programmer, said that's long, but that's the delay we want to get at. And so actually, it's rather cheap. It's one ray a frame.
Sounds amazing. Well done, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey guys, thank you. You guys are so fucking amazing at what you do.
Thanks.
So, I have so many questions, but there's a long line already.
Cool.
I was wondering if you could speak kind of at a high level where the player importance factors into your importance scale, like how you're balancing the sense of player empowerment against situational feedback.
It's definitely been a tricky thing for us. I mean, so the importance system doesn't, it runs on the player, but we don't utilize it. The sounds don't actually change according to their importance. But getting it right in the mix has been something that we iterate on a lot. There's, again, one of those instincts that, after years of game audio, you always think that the weapon, your first player weapon, is always the loudest thing. Yeah. We actually aren't doing that. We're pulling it back significantly. It's still nice and punchy, and hopefully it is where it needs to be, but we had to lower it so that we can get more of the external sounds to have a moment to shine. So, yeah.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Hi there. I really liked the way you guys handled the VO and how you didn't play it on certain players, and that's all on the server, right? It's not client side.
Well, the server sends it to everyone, and then each client makes decisions about what it should hear.
Okay, and is the audio still going there, but then it's being muted through Wise, or how is it being?
No, so we do multiple selection steps. We select which is the most important stimulus that occurred this frame, and if multiple occur, then we skip the other ones. So let's say a death comes in, and then we select what line to play. We have multiple variations, maybe with additional criteria, and then we send those lines to each player, to like each connected computer, and then the clients themselves, have another little selection where they say, well, right now that hero is currently talking. I don't play that, or if it's a death, it comes in and it overwrites it, and so the client has also this view of that world that happened in that frame, which one each client takes.
Yeah,
I see.
And there's also a mini version of the importance system that runs that helps. So if the guys aren't important, they don't say all their less important lines. So we've kind of categorized them in that way.
I see. So the event doesn't even reach the client if it doesn't even.
Or if it does, and it just says I don't need this, and it doesn't do anything with it.
Okay. Well, thanks. Yeah, game sounds fantastic.
Cool.
Thank you. Oh, cut it now?
Oh, we're done.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thanks you. We will take your question in the
No problem.
what is it? The wrap up, the overlook room, and
022.
have a great safe travel home. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.